I'm Claire Cousins, one of the assistant helpers at the Textiles East Fair. It's great to see you. Hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed the last video, which is part 1. You're now looking at part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I do recommend you go back and view that video. If I remember, I'll try and put a link up here somewhere. It is to make this little cottage box, so yeah, you'll get to see how I do the embroidery and how it's constructed and how it's put together. If you want to know the initial stages, as I say, it's in part 1. So come and look at my desk and enjoy. So just here, I've already done a few little bits. You can probably just about make them out. I'm just doing a basic running stitch. Well, sort of like a running back stitch, whatever stitch works best, just to indicate some brickwork. So I'm doing a line, and then I'm doing sort of a brick up, and then I'm doing a line of stitching again. Just keeping it simple. Like that. And you can just do like a little staggered upright as well, so it looks like you've got more than several rows of bricks. I'm just scattering them around in different colour, sort of tanny browns. I'm going to do my door knocker now. I'll just show you this one. There we go. It's just a very simple V, a couple of stripes and then a French knot. And I've done it in gold. So I've got several golds. I've got a Gutermann version. I've got a Madeira version. I'm going to do it double thickness. Okay, so I've done it double thickness, and I don't know if you can see, but I've used a heat erase pen or a friction, and I've come up, do my French knot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I've wrapped it around my needle 5 times. I'm going to go back down, still holding the thread, pulling the thread tight around the needle, and then I'm going to pull it through. I mean, that would be quite nice as a little bead if you've got a bead. You can just do the door knocker. It's very simple. It's just an up to the top. And then down to the top. And then just across the bottom to form a little door knocker. Hopefully you can see that, like that. And then for the letterbox, I'm just doing a couple of straight stitches across. That's all that needs. Might do one more. Oh, just got enough. And then back down. Like that. Hopefully you can see here the difference in the 2 window boxes. This has got some pink and red in it. This has just got the red in it. So I'm now going to add, so I've scattered the red throughout. I'm now going to come up and I'm going to add some pink, so you've got to get a bit of a 2-tone effect. I mean, you can do whatever colours you like. I tend to do them for about 5 and then I go back down. Now if you don't pull them too tight, you can have them quite loose. I seem to have a habit of pulling mine quite tight, but you don't have to at all. In fact, at some point I'm going to try and perfect the art of not doing them too tight. So you come up, you hold it in one hand, you get your needle in the other and you wrap 5 and then you go back down. And if you want it tight, you pull it here with this thumb and finger. If you don't want it tight, you don't pull. Then you drop down. So I'm just going to scatter the pink in between the red. It's very subtle, you can barely see the difference in all honesty, but I mean I can see it better probably not under the camera. Now these hollyhocks, I don't know if you can see them there, you'll probably see them better on the coloured versions. They're done using a blanket stitch but in a circle, so I'm going to, the thing is they're so tiny and so intricate I couldn't actually film them on the cottage because you wouldn't have seen what I was doing. So I'm going to do it on a bigger version. You can see how I do them if you want to do them. You don't have to do hollyhocks. In fact, my other box, well, I've got several boxes. I used to have several boxes. I don't know where the other houses have all gone. Scattered around my house probably. That might be, I might just do one more and that'll be enough. One, two, three, four, 5, then down. So you can barely see the difference, but it's more noticeable in the daylight. I'm going to just share with you the different types of flowers and stitching I've done. So I've done 2-tone grass. I've got a dark grass and a lighter grass over the top. That's just straight stitch. I've got some lazy daisies at the base of these hollyhocks, and the hollyhocks is, and I will explain that when I do a bigger version, it's just a blanket stitch in a circle. I've got underneath that, I've got all my daisy chain 2-tone flowers. So I've got the dark and I've got the mid colour, and then I've got my French notch, which I've demonstrated. These are all straight stitch. We've got a blanket stitch. Now this one I've done a rose, so I've done a, I was going to say split stitch, it's not a split stitch, it is a stem stitch. So I've done it, you used a stem stitch, but you can use a split stitch, you can couch some branches on, and then these are like lazy daisy flowers and lazy daisy leaves. So yeah, if I compare that to this one, I don't know if you can see that. This is a slip stitch, no, this is stem stitch, and I've used a thick at the bottom, so I've used 2 thicknesses of thread, or possibly even 3 actually, of thread coming up, and then I've taken it into a single to make the branches thinner, and then I've used French knots, and I've used daisy chain, or not daisy chain, it's not a chain, it's single daisy, to make the leaves on this. This one I've kept it simple. I've just used simple cross stitches there. There's no hollyhocks on this one at all, so you can make it as complicated, or in this case a bit simpler, as much as you like. It's time to explore all your stitches really. So as I say, pop that there like that, and you can see how this plant grows around the edge, which is, I quite like that effect. Yeah, so hopefully that will give you some ideas. Right, I'm going to show you some of these actual stitches, but on a larger scale, because as I say, this was so tiny. I was realising that I couldn't film it because my hands was just in the way all the time. So I'm going to get some fabric and some thread, show you some of those main stitches. Right, I've got some just some piece of old felt, and I've got some it's perlé, so you can see what I'm doing. All the stitches on mine, it was actually just 2 strands of the 6-stranded embroidery thread or floss or whatever you want to call it. But as I say, I'm just using perlé for demonstration purposes so you can see what I'm doing. So to do the stem stitch, I start off with stem stitch. That was where I used it on the this part here where something's growing, something that's going up. So I've come up, and you draw, if you want to draw your line on, in fact I'll draw a line on, then you can see how I follow the line. So there's my line for my stem, just using a friction pen. So all you do is you kind of follow your line, but you come back on yourself. So it's a strange thing, in so much as, and you go well, in my case I don't always go quite halfway, and you kind of just keep following the line, but then coming back on yourself a little bit. And I like this, especially if I'm using variegated threads. And depending on how you like to stitch, you can either go fully back or you can go halfway back, and that's down to your preference. So you can see that I'm going in, going back on myself. That's called a stem stitch, like that. Okay, so that's stem stitch. Now, when I keep referring to lazy daisies, so if you're thinking about wanting to put a leaf on or do some petals, all you do is you come up, hopefully you can see this, you come up where you want it to start, the leaf or the petal, you go back in to where you came up, and then you take a little bite to how big you want your petal or your leaf to be. You take the thread behind it, and then you pull it up. And because the thread's behind it, you can like trap a loop. And to trap that loop, you then sew the other side of the loop, and you come down. And there we have a leaf. And I could do another one here at the end of my stem stitch to make it look like it's finishing off like a branch, like that. Obviously, if this was in green, it would look like flower. It would look like leaves. Now, to do a flower like this, if you just come up in the centre of your flower, wherever you want your flower to be, so that's where I'd like my flower to be, you can come up. Now, you can do as many of these, keep going back to the centre, as you like, and sometimes mine are 4, sometimes mine are 3. You know, it depends how big you want your flower to be. You come up, back up into the middle, you do your loop, you go back into the middle, take your little bite, make sure the thread's behind, and you pull up. Now, some people like to draw some circles to help them keep within a space, but I kind of think, well, flowers are not all even, and for me, I'm not too bothered. And you can see I'm coming up. This one might be, because I've got 3 quite close together, I could leave it like that and put a little French knot there, and I'd end up with what looks like a little echinacea. Okay, going back to the actual parts of the cottage, I've got, this is just a cereal box. I mean, as I said at the beginning, you might be better off with construction card or mount board or something or other. But as I say, for this I'm just going to use a cereal box. But I have found, because I want it not to, this does show through the fabric. I don't know if you can see, it does show through. So I don't want it to show through the fabric. It's a bit too flimsy anyway. So I'm going to stick it back to back. So this is the base. This is the 8cm by 8cm. And I'm going to just use Pritt stick, which here is like a firm glue. You can use Elmer's, but you'd have to wait for it to dry. So this is our Pritt stick. It's just a hard stick, and in my case it's a bit gooey. I think I've made a mess of that, haven't I? I'll just spread it out a bit. I think it's probably, I don't know why that's done that actually. It's normally very, very good. Let me put it on this one as well. And this one is the 8 by 6. Now, what I will say to you, depending on how your embroidery's gone or how your fabric has reacted. You might need to cut these down a fraction to make them fit later on. So there we go. Just spread. I don't want big lumps of Pritt stick everywhere, so I'm just spreading it out. So I'm just doing back to back, sticking them together. The same with that one. I mean, you could use double-sided tape. You don't even have to use glue if you don't want it to be wet and sticky. I'm just going to leave those to dry. So I need to have just one for the base, 4 for the sides, and then the triangular roof. And the triangular roof, I explained at the beginning, is like this. So it's a 9 centimetre full base. You find your right angle, you measure up 5.5 centimetres, and then you can draw your lines down. And I'm going to do that in card as well. So hopefully have all my card pieces ready for the next stage. I've got all my triangular panels ready for the roof. If you're going to be using the construction card that you can buy for sort of graphic production, then you only need to cut 1 of each. So you need 4 triangles. If you're going to be using, which I've done, is cereal packets, I would double up to thicken it. Now you can choose to glue these together or not. It's your choice actually. You don't need to because you're slotting them in anyway. So that's my roof panels. I've done the same with the wall, so only 1 of each if it's construction card. If it's cereal packets, you might want 2 again, so you can end up with 8 sides. And again for the base, either 1 in construction card or 2. I've actually stuck this one together already. I was thinking I can't get that apart. Yeah, I've already stuck that one. So yeah, that's all ready. Now this is how far I've got. So I've now finished the embroidered panel. There we go, like that. You can see that okay. And you'll notice the bottom bit's all still quite plain because that will be going up. Now the next stage, so if I can explain the next stages, you have to bear with me on this because it sounds really strange, but you are going to fold that over the top. So that plain calico, you're going to fold over the top, or if you did cut it off, put it back on, but make sure you've got seam allowance on the bottom edge. So you need a seam allowance on the bottom edge as well as on the top. And you're going to press, I would press it if I was you. And then you're going to sew. But remember a couple of things. Wherever your back wall is, so for me, this is my back wall where the hinge will be. My hinge is going to be in this section here. So I'm going to keep that bit open. Okay, so that whole wall edge I'm going to keep open. So that means I need to remember where it is. So it might be a good idea to get a wall panel like this. And I would mark it on this side like that. Just here. And you might even want to write the words open to remind you. I'm going to put a little O to remind me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sew down this one edge down here. Now you can choose to machine sew or you can hand sew. So you can machine sew this or you can hand sew it. I'm going to start from that little mark that I made because that allows me to slot my wall in. Yeah. And so I'm going to start from here and I'm just going to sew along my top edge all the way along, whatever seam allowance you've done. I think my seam allowance was 1.5, so I'm going to stick to that. Again, I can hand sew it or I can machine it depending on whether I want to get the machine out or not. And then when you come to the corner here, you're then going to close it. So you can close this down. So that will basically give you a tube with a little opening here for you to pull it through. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to sew that. I don't think you need to see me sewing it. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So that's the house part. Now this is the hinge. It was 8 centimetres by 1.5. You might want to do it 2 actually, but I've done it perhaps a bit too narrow. I'm just going to do a very simple single hem. You can choose to zigzag over that. This is where your sewing machine might struggle, which is why I said you might want to go a little bit bigger, a little bit, yeah. So you could just do a very small seam there on both sides. So it's just both on the edges. Let me show you on the actual box. Let me just point that out. So I don't know if you can, rake it out. There's a tiny little seam here. It doesn't want to be too big. So that's that. Now the roof, I've done the roof. I seem to recall, I think I did show you how to do the darts on this roof, and I've embroidered it. Okay, so that's all embroidered now. So this is the lining. So the lining, let me just remind you, I did the same technique with the lining to create the dart. So I used my paper template, I've then folded it, I've then stitched each of the darts for each corner. Okay, and that will be my lining like that. So to put that together, I need to match right sides together. So this is the thing you have to remember, right sides together. I'm going to match that top point, which can be quite tricky, but I'm going to match that corner point there. I'm going to put a little pin in there so it doesn't move. So I put a pin in, and then I'm going to match each of these corners here. Now a good tip would be to push one of them one way and then one dart the other way, so they match up a little bit better. And then I'm going to match up each of the darts at the end, and then when I've done that, I can then stitch along and I've actually already marked up my stitch line, and I marked it up because what I did is when I drew around my template like that, I knew where to stitch and I marked it on. Okay, now again, like the back of the house, you need to decide which is your back of your roof, and wherever your back of your roof is, you will need to leave it open. Okay, because not only is it for you to insert the hinge into, it'll also help you pull it the correct way through and then stuff it afterwards. That kind of sounds quite complicated, but I think you're just going to have to trust me, or just watch the rest of this video and then you'll see it works. I hope, anyway. So I'm going to accurately pin this, I'm going to stitch round 3 of the sides, and then I'll come back and show you again how I'm getting on. I've done quite a lot of stitching. I actually ended up using the sewing machine because I actually had several components to do. So I have stitched, this is the base panel, right sides together. I've just sewn the 2 edges. I've kept an opening here. You might want to just clip the folded corner where the fold is, and then just pull it inside out like that. And then you're going to have to hope your base fits. If your base doesn't fit, that might be because your seams might be bigger than you thought, or your seams might be smaller than you thought. To be honest with you, cottages are quite quirky. They're not always perfect. I would just trim down the card to fit, as long as it doesn't affect the whole build aspect of it. So the walls don't fit at all, and that would be a bit of a shame. So I'm just popping my base cardboard in there, like that. Now I actually have, if you look, it's too small. So in that case, because it is, if anything, if the cardboard is slightly too big, you can trim it, but I wouldn't go where the cardboard is too small because that is not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to pull that out and I am going to restitch it, but it's important that you know you can trim your card a few mil, but you can't have your fabric too baggy. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do with that. Now the roof, I've stitched the 3 sides that I wanted to stitch, so I've stitched those 3 sides. Now this is where I then cut or trim off these corners, being careful not to cut through my stitching. I will cut that one off yet. So cut off, avoiding your stitching. You might want to trim it up if you think it's too long. I think I might, no, I think I might just trim that a little bit. There you go. I'm going to leave the one with the hinge though. It was obviously not quite a square when I stitched it, when I cut it. I'm going to then pull it through the correct way, and you now should have all the right sides showing. At the moment it just looks a bit odd, but this is where you start to put your pieces in. So you can now see that's the roof forming. Now with the roof bits, you're going to have two pieces, as I say, if it's cereal packet, you're going to put them in. And I would start with the one furthest from the hinge. So I'm just popping the card in. And it does take a little bit of wiggling and fiddling to get it in. And then once you're happy with it, see I've now got it in there, I would make sure all, especially this edge here, you want the raw edges, if you can feel them, you want the raw edges on the inside. So basically if you open this up, you can push all the raw edges on the underside of that piece of card like that, and I can feel that's now in. Okay, if I haven't got quite a point here, I might just get a little darning needle or something to help pull that point out. Let me have a look, see what I've got. I've got quite a biggish needle. Pull that corner out, just gently ease it. You don't want it to go where you've trimmed it. There we go. Now if the card's a fraction big, as I say, you might want to trim off a mil or two, but not too much, not much more than a mil. Or in my case, I'm just stretching it to fit. Now once I've stretched it to fit, what I would do is I would actually pop a couple of stitches, I would hand stitch down that edge. So make sure it's right in that point. Grab a bit of thread. So I'm going to try and get that there, and I want to put a little stitch, taking it from this side. So I'm going to take the stitch from this side and I'm going to bring it up through there and make sure it's there, and then pop a little stitch back down again and line it up with the roof there. And then what I can do is, if you go back in but not through all the fabric, you can work your way up to another little point and then stitch up again. It just means you've got your thread tail is hidden inside the roof, if that makes sense. Oops. And then you can see that I've got that one, it's already started to go in properly. Again, I'm just going to stitch, pop a little stitch here, and if I don't line up, you can see I'm not lining up. Pull the lining so it does line up, and then I can put another stitch in there. Now I've just done it from the little, you could go all the way down, you can start at the bottom and work your way up completely. I've just pretty much gone part way, and I'd do that and I would go back down the other side. So you can hand stitch like I've just mentioned. So this time I'm going to go under the lining so you can't see it, to pop up again at a new location, and then stitch back through to the top. Now you can see I'm completely out there, so I'd be pulling this roof, oops, let me find that middle again. I'll be pulling the roof to match up with the lining. Oh, that's a bit harder because the corner's just there. And as I say, it does need some time and some effort, and it will need me looking more closely, because at the moment I am definitely not in the right area. I can just, hang on. I think I'm there. Am I there? Might be there. We'll give it a go. My needle doesn't want to come through. Oh, yes it has. There we go. So you can see how that's pulling that roof in place. And you'd repeat that with the other ones. I haven't finished up sewing that one in, but you would then get your next panel, pop them in, again wiggling it in, like that. There you go, you can see how it's working. And again, I would then stitch that edge. I repeat on that side too. So I hope that's explained the roof to that point. Now, in relation to the main body of the house, here's the main body of the house. I've stitched that too. I'm going to trim off some of these corners and some of these threads. This corner needs a bit of a trim, not too much. Might have to give that corner a bit of attention. This bit here. And then where we've got that hole at the back for the hinge, that's where we can pull it through. And once that's pulled through, probably give it an iron, might be a good idea. But if I just explain, I'm losing memory time on my camera, so I'm going to have to quickly explain what you do next. You get your panels, your side squares, and you're dropping it into this back one. And as soon as you've dropped it in, like that, you then feed it down to the end that's closed, and you do that with all your panels. In order to get the card in, what I recommend you do is you push it against your stomach like this, and then you gently roll it in. What I will recommend is you make sure that the raw edges are on the inside, and that should work. You can push from here and keep going, but as I say, I find it easier to keep working this down against my body like that, and trying to do it evenly, so not one side more than the other, and then pull it like that. And these corners again here, just pull out with a needle gently. You don't want your corner to suddenly burst. Like that. And again, if you can wiggle it, you can feel the raw edges on the inside. If you can wiggle it on the back edge. And then bit by bit, once you've got them all in, you'll end up with your square. Once you've got them all in, what you'll have to do is then coax them into their corners to form the square. It does take a little bit of coaxing and wiggling. They should eventually form a square like that. And then you just slip stitch this wall closed. Right, this bit here, this is the corner, and I'm just slip stitching across from one side to the other, just catching the outer edge. So it's like a little slip stitch. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. So I'm catching the outer and then coming back across. Or it's like a almost like a ladder stitch, I suppose. I'm going to do that all the way up. And that will help create that wall corner. So I've slip stitched up here. I've now got to the bit where the hinge is going to go in a minute. So what I might do is just deal with this corner. This is quite fiddly. You'll have to just gently fold it in. Probably can't really see what I'm doing, unfortunately, but I'm gently teasing it in with my needle to try and tease that in. I'm just using the thread just to catch it. So that's where I'm up to there. Right, I'm just going to put the needle in there for a minute because I need to get my hinge. So here's my hinge. I think I'm going to position it so it sits just in there, like that. Don't know if you can see. So I'm going to have to fold this edge. Just the amount of the turning. Tuck that in as I do it. This is it is fiddly, so be warned. Like that. Pop some pins along there. You've also got to tuck this piece down like that and sort of bring it up to that. So that will be pinned along there like that. So once you've pinned it, it takes a little bit of jiggling and pokery. Get exactly where you want it to go. You might want to start off with a deeper hinge if you're struggling. So as I say, you can always adjust my measurements to best suit you. And then I'm going to sew through from here through to here and keep going from side to side, and I'll work that through. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm just coming up from one side, doing a tiny like a prick pin stitch, and then as I'm coming through I'm just checking where I'm coming through on the inside, making sure I'm catching the very top there, and then I'm doing another little pin stitch, but I am going slightly diagonally with my stitch so I don't always just stay in the same place, and I'm just working my way along, and that will seal that top edge, and it will, every now and again you need to just use your needle to turn it back in. I'm just going from side to side, and I'll be doing that all the way along. I'm doing the base now. I've restitched some of the sides to make it fit a bit better so it's nice and snug. I've folded in, so you basically fold in here and then you fold this top edge in, and I've pinned it in place. Oh, it's popping out again. So you just, again, you can use your needle just to help pull it in. And I'm just going to slip stitch this closed. So again, it's just pulling up, picking up one side and pulling it forward to the front. I'm going to do this all the way along, so picking up the back, picking up the front, back, and then front, back and then front. Oh, got some thread from somewhere. Back and then front. And I'm just going to do that all the way along. This will actually all be hidden in the walls actually, it's on the edge. Oh, make sure you do take a small bite. If you take a too big a bite, it will show. Finish that off with a knot. Let's finish off with that. I'm not going to cut it because actually I can use it in the next section. Going back to the house now. This here, you may remember I stitched it in a minute ago. In hindsight, I think I'd stitched this panel in whilst this was flat, and then do this bit. So I would recommend putting that in and then doing that. Okay. So now I want this at the back. I think you can actually just kind of like tuck it in. And just tuck it in. It should just tuck into the walls, one hopes. Perfect, it does tuck in. So what I'm going to do now is where I've just finished in the corner, I don't know if you can see, I'm just going to go grab into the corner here and grab it there and then pick it up on my base. So this, again, this is a case of just taking a tiny little bit from each side and just working my way along. And again, it's just a bit at a time, all the way down. Whoops. Pops out, pop it back in. So as you can see, I've nearly done a side, and I'll just get to the corner and I'll just keep going all the way around. I'm coming up to the corner here now, so I'll just carry on picking a little bit off each side, and then as I get to the corner, just carry on, making sure I've got the actual corner of the base matched up, and then I just change directions and carry on round like that. So I've done 2 edges already. I can now reposition that to make it more accurate, and you can see already it's starting to look like a box. I hope you can see this okay, but what I've done is I've now put in the last triangle. I've stitched just in the grooves. You can barely, well, you can't see it at all, to be honest, because it's kind of like a stitch in the ditch around each of the pieces of card. And then on the inside of this piece of card, I've actually put some sticky back tape so I can pull it and get it down. I would have videoed that, but it was quite a job holding it and pulling it and putting it in like that. Okay, so I've done that because it will then make that a little bit easier to actually put the hinge on, because the hinge is now going to feed into there. I don't know if you can see that. It'll feed into there like that, and this hem will need folding down to hide that. So once that's in, oops, let me just work out how much needs to be folded. It's got to be there, so it might be a good idea to press that fold in. That might make it a little bit easier. Grab a pin and then pin that through like that, and then just double check how it sits on the roof, and if it's a little bit wonky you might want to readjust it accordingly and keep adjusting it until you're happy. I'm going to go for there. Oh no, it's popped out there now. There. That's a bit closer. So I don't know if you can see that. I will be adjusting it accordingly. I'll show you the one that's been stitched already. You'll see you can it kind of just, by the time you've stitched it in, it's sort of just like a little ridge. And again, it's just the method of slip stitching, so it might be that I slip stitch this edge first and then I slip stitch this edge. So I slip stitch this edge first and then I slip stitch this edge. Oh. Hopefully you can see I'm just picking up a little bit of the hinge and a little bit of the roof. I'm working my way along. Not easy to coax it, but you can coax it. And then hopefully I can sew that shut. I'm now picking up the lining inside and then coming forward and just closing this gap here. Again, if threads come back out, you just use your needle to tuck them all back in. I'll just knot off here. Looking good. Right, so all I've got to do now is work my way back. I'm not sure I've got enough thread. It's a shame. So as I just said, I would knot this corner off. Make sure that's all tucked in there before I do. I always like to try and hide my tail inside. Cut that off. And once that's stitched all along there, that'll be done. In fact, believe it or not, I think I've actually caught a bit of it. Same from the other side. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that project. It is a difficult one. But thank you for joining me. Don't forget to either share, give me a thumbs up. If you want to post what you make, your images, there is a friends page on the Facebook. If you go on Textiles East Facebook, there's a friends group you can ask to join. And it would be lovely to actually see your version of the little cottage project. So thanks for now, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye.